I'm Professor Noctis. I teach religion and Final Fantasy at University of Alabama, and we have a good time here on screen.
Hey everyone, I'm Evan, and I'm here with the one and the only Professor Noctis.
What's up? Summer Noctis in the house.
Summer Noctis in the house. We love it. So this episode, we are going to be exploring the Switch 2. It's been out for about a month, and so we're going to be talking about when is a sequel potentially better than the original, or when is a sequel potentially worse than the original. We're going to be talking about what makes Nintendo games just so magical, so imaginative, such a sense of awe and wonder when we play them. We're going to be talking about why Nintendo gets a pass when we criticize a lot of other companies for a lot of the same practices.
Yeah, we're getting into it today. There's a lot.
And then we're going to end the segment talking about what we can do to establish some of that sense of wonder and magic that comes with those early Nintendo days to our gaming experience now. So stay tuned. So Wade, you have had the Switch 2 for about a month. Give us some first impressions here. How's it been?
So let me introduce to the channel the first appearance of my own Switch 2. There it is.
What's its name?
Switch 2. Obviously.
Oh. Hi, this is my Switch 2. Switch 2. Switch 2, say hey to the audience.
Hi. He's waving with this little... Actually, he's got this little tail thing that he could kind of flap. And wave,
I love that.
Isn't that neat?
Well, walk us
Which
through
is so sturdy.
Watch us through some of the form factor here.
Form factor of this baby. I don't know if you've had your hands on a Switch 2 yet. The thing feels sturdy. Okay, like I didn't ever really think that the Switch 1 felt like unsturdy, but this feels like quality, really, really solid design. Okay, and like I don't want to say like it doesn't feel like plastic. Somewhere between like plastic and metal. I don't know what they're using, but
it's got like a soft touch to it.
It is so nice and sleek, and it is just like, I don't know.
A little grippy.
It's got some heft to it. It feels like solid, you know?
Does the screen feel like it could withstand a staple through the front of it?
You'd have to ask other people for that, because I've heard some horror stories. But for me, that's not a reality I've ever been threatened with. Good. So, but I don't know if the screen could withstand that, but it does withstand a lot. And I don't even have like a screen protector on mine. So like, and it's been on planes with me so far. It's been like on some road trips, like.
Okay, talk me through some of the big changes as far as how things connect. So I know one of the biggest changes is how the Joy-Cons slip on.
I want to show you that right now because I think it's one of the coolest things in the world. Okay, so there we've got the Joy-Con right there, but then you've got these little like fun little triggers on the back. Okay, I don't know if you can.
Okay, so Wade's showing right here small release mechanism that
there's
looks
a small
like it's
release mechanism. Now on the last ones, you remember you had to use your like giant, giant
the
fingers,
tiny button and
little fat fingers to get into that little tiny button. Not so anymore. Okay, like this is built for adult hands too, not just little child fingers.
Oh, okay.
So this one, you've got like a little trigger on the back. Watch this. You press it.
Oh,
boom. And it just like snaps right off. Now watch this. Watch this madness. Let's see if I can hear it. Oh, see that? It just snaps magnetically. If I can line it up. There it goes.
Oh. Okay, so the old Switch, if you hadn't
it's like magic.
Had like a rail system, so you could slide one Joy-Con onto the other. This one is much improved. I don't know if you ever accidentally put the wrong one on the wrong slide.
Oh, I felt like I broke it every time.
I was like, I've ruined it.
Every time I was like, I ruined it. My new toy is over. So, and I can't imagine.
I can't imagine. Toy on the way home.
I broke my new toy. I was like, I can't imagine like dumb children like making this work.
Dumb children like us.
But honestly, kids get it a little bit better than I do. I was like, why doesn't this thing work? They're like, Boomer, give me that Switch.
They're teaching you how to use the touch screen.
Here, Grandpa, so let me show you how to use this thing.
How is the screen?
The screen is great. Now, there's been a little bit of like hubbub about like the it's an LCD screen instead of the OLED, and it's apparently 50% slower than
on the response
Switch.
rate.
on the response rate or something like that. I'll be honest, I don't know those things.
Do you notice
it has not affected. I've never noticed it. That's not a thing for me, but the screen is gigantic. It's very, very big.
It is big.
Here, I think, actually, let's do a comparison really quick. I've got one right here. This is not for the Switch 2 or the Switch, but this is a competitor, the PlayStation Portal. So if you look at these two things, the Switch screen is bigger than the PlayStation Portal screen.
Okay.
Which is kind of interesting. So you can also see how dirty my screens are. Like, clean these things, you man.
Or it just means you're actually playing the video game console, which I'm very proud of you. Good job.
I do not just buy these things to collect them and talk about them on the internet. Like, I'm actually a gamer, turns out. So,
well, I mean, that's, debatable from some folks.
Anyway, here's the thing about it.
You talk about it. Oh, go ahead.
I love this thing. It seems as though everything that I enjoyed about the Switch 1 is just better here from a system standpoint. Okay. The games look crisp. The even older games, Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, they're running at 60 frames per second. And it's amazing. Good. Even in the Korok Forest, which was like the biggest slowdown in the world, this thing has made these games fresh in a new way, just from a playability standpoint. Possibly the biggest upgrade was to some games like Hyrule Warriors, which I personally love. Critically, whatever. But for me, I love them, and the split screen is good, but it does have a lot of slowdown. It is much more playable and enjoyable on the Switch, too.
Well, I think that leads us into that first thing that we wanted to discuss, which you said, maybe Hyrule Warriors wasn't the most critically acclaimed game, but you like it, you have fun, and you get lost in the play of it. What is it about Nintendo games and Nintendo consoles, their ecosystem, that you think creates this incredible sense of magic and wonder that we experience? I know what it's been for me.
Well, Evan, I think it's a great question because consoles launch like all the time. Like we get the PlayStation 5, the new Xbox. There's a new Xbox kind of handheld that's coming out. But I'll tell you, as a gamer for the last 30 some odd years, there's nothing like a Nintendo console launch. There's nothing like it because it is a promise that you're going to get some of the most magical and awe-inspiring worlds and experiences that you can get in gaming. That's been the case since the regular Nintendo to the Super Nintendo. I remember when I got that for my birthday, my dad brought it home and surprised me, and I played Mario World, right? And then I remember the day the Nintendo 64 came out. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'll never forget it. It was the end of September, and my local Toys R Us was supposed to be getting in some preview units. And so I remember I was so excited about Mario 64. This is how I should have known I would one day be like who I am today, Professor Noctis, right? I scoured print media to find all the information I could about what was going to happen with the new Mario. And so there was the introduction of this thing called the analog stick, and you push it a little bit forward and Mario would tiptoe, or if you push it all the way, he would run. And, it was just amazing. So I remember I was at a sleepover with some friends. Okay, this is the kind of person I was. And we're all playing and hanging out and stuff. But then I set up shop in this kid's kitchen. Mm-hmm. I was over at someone's house. It was not at my house. And I had all of my things out, and one by one, I called people over to tell them about the Nintendo system and what Mario could do. One by one, Evan, throughout the sleepover.
TV setup, or you just had a magazine with?
I had a magazine, and I was just talking about. I was like, "This is really cool." So I was trying to influence my friends to be N64 day one buyers, and you know what? They were.
You were. You ran a Nintendo information booth at a sleepover.
Before the internet.
You turned it into a convention. Oh, I love that.
And it was, but I was teaching them all about it. I was like, it's conceivable. I was so excited about talking about the possibilities of a video game system that like thrived in a 3D space and how they were imagining what video games could be. But that's what the Nintendo 64 was doing. We had games like I think at that point Crash Bandicoot and like some 3D very, very linear corridor style games. But there was something about Nintendo doing it where we were like, they're going to do it right. They're going to show us the standard for what this is going to be.
That's the question is when
I feel like that's what they've been.
When and why did Nintendo become the standard bearer for where these games kind of go? So the question is then, and I'll say it again, when and how did Nintendo become the standard bearer when we think about just imaginative, creative, wonder-inducing play experiences? How did they pick up that mantle?
Wow, I think it's a good question because I'm not sure there was one moment in time, but I want to say it was the advent of the Nintendo 64 and Mario 64. I want to say that because they delivered on a promise of a dream of what gaming could be like in this new realm or world or era. But I also think that they had built the groundwork for it from like Mario 3 days. I think maybe Mario 3 may be the moment on the regular Nintendo, because you took that pixelated 8-bit Mario and turned him into like a very kind of robust character. Yeah, Mario 2 did it to a degree, but it wasn't as critically acclaimed as Mario 1. Mario 3, though, brought in the raccoon tail and all of these different biomes and worlds and a cast of characters that then became iconic. Then there was a companion cartoon that really helped build the imagination. It was the introduction of the Koopalings and all this stuff. And so you just really got engrossed in a video game with a cast of characters that was almost Disney-like.
You talk about this cast of characters. This cast of characters was meaningful to you.
You
shared a story in the past about the things that you would do to be able to learn, for example, how to draw some of these cast of characters. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what your connection was to these characters.
When I was, even playing on the regular Nintendo, I remember like stopping the screen. And like I can't remember, some games when you paused the game, characters would disappear from the screen. So oftentimes I would just leave the game running and I would run up to the TV with like a sheet of like loose leaf paper and I would press it against the screen and I would try to trace like Mario or whoever it was. Yeah, I remember specifically doing this with Yoshi and stuff. And like if the game had a timer and they would disappear when you paused it, well, you had to like trace it fast enough before you got game over, because if you got game over, this was key, or if you lost a life, then your character would look different and be in a different spot, and so you'd have to start over the whole tracing process. But that's how I learned to draw a lot of these characters. I did this on the Sega Genesis as well. That's how I learned to draw Sonic and Tails and all of that.
Well, is that a marker of wonder,
mental
and imagination?
Illness, probably.
Yeah, that too.
It was, but I think that it was also a luxury of being a kid, a luxury of, you're afforded the luxury of boredom when you're a kid, whereas as an adult, that's kind of stolen from you. And so you game for very different reasons. But I think that the reason why Nintendo holds such a soft spot in all of our hearts is because those early memories when we had that luxury were formed by them.
Well, there was a Planet Money episode on June 16th that a friend of ours sent to me, and it covered the history of Nintendo and how they got to be the company that they are in kind of celebration with the launch of this Switch 2. So I won't go through everything. It's a short 10, 15-minute segment. You can check it out on Planet Money, June 16th. But they talk about the rise of Nintendo and where they came in. And one of the things that they talk about as why Nintendo got emplaced in this role in gaming was the timing of when they released the NES console. Because they were a playing card company first, right? They made playing cards, And then when everybody was into the video game space, Atari and the Commodore 64, it all crashed out. So people don't often hear about the bubble that was early video gaming, where it was going and the games were complicated and the rules were difficult and the play experience wasn't fun and the games were just overly challenging. And some people really liked that. But for the broad consumer base, things had really faded out. So a bunch of companies had invested a ton of money and resources developing these home video game consoles, and the bubble had burst. And so this bubble burst, and Nintendo goes, we're going to do video games. And everybody says, what? Video games are on the way out, but they had a unique take. And so when everyone was exiting the space and all the infrastructure was collapsing around it, Nintendo was introducing a new, easy way to play video games with the focus, and this is what they say in the episode, the focus was on fun. The focus was on fun. And so they made games that had some challenge, but they weren't going to exclusively have a ton of challenge without having the fun. Now, if you've ever played the Lion King game for Super Nintendo, you could say, but that's not a Nintendo launch title, right? Think about the games that came with the Nintendo endorsed. Now, everybody could make games for it, but to what extent do you view them being the only ones in the space to create these nostalgic childhood memories in the video game space as a legacy that has carried on from generations now as people have kids and get their kids Nintendos? And how is that related to your experience?
One of the things that I love about Nintendo is that they fundamentally believe that gaming is for everyone. I think that you're right, or this podcast was right in saying that the gaming space was it had a pretty high barrier to entry. It's like if we invented video games today and said video games for everyone and gave them Dark Souls, right? It's like that's not going to be a great entryway. But Nintendo is the great pioneer that said we're making this about fun. This is what games are, and anybody can do it. And we're going to create some other experiences that are going to be a little bit more niche. Not everybody's going to get into Animal Crossing unless there's a worldwide pandemic, for example. But
and you need an Easter service.
And we need an Easter service. But and not everybody's going to be into Splatoon. But we are going to create experiences that are focused on fun and are going to give you what you're looking for, whether it's challenge, adventure, story, or co-op, which I think is a great hallmark of Nintendo as well.
Well, and I wonder if we could spend just a few minutes talking about how you know that a game has moved past just an entertainment experience and into that wonder, and it's occupying your imagination and your thoughts outside of the game. For example, you decided you wanted to engage your creative side because you wanted to be able to draw the characters. Yeah. So you created a game within the game in your own house to get the characters traced in time so that you could make your own memories with them. You wanted to interact with them in your own way. You wanted to apply your creativity to it. What other ways do we know that games and gaming properties have infiltrated not just our play spaces, but we think about them and put them in our everyday lives?
Well, it's like a book that you put down and you can't stop thinking about the characters when you're at work or something like that. It's very similar with video games. I remember when I was in second grade, I had run up and traced all the characters of Final Fantasy IV back in the day. And the reason I did that, I know that there were instruction booklets, but I liked the sprites better than the official art. I did, and I
You're
still
a real
do
one
to this day. No disrespect to Amano-san, but this is incredibly, like, I loved the pixels, and so I would draw those. And then when I was in class, we would do, I remember some freehand writing and storytelling sort of stuff, and I would create scenarios for these characters, and I would include their little drawings on the side, and I loved that sort of thing. Thinking about the characters, using them to bolster some of my things when I was, I remember, this is such a silly deep cut for Wade. I remember I was playing baseball and I was terrified of fast pitch when I first got into it. Okay. Like it was it was no longer T-ball. It was no longer coach pitch. It was fast pitch, player pitch baseball. And I just remember there was a character in a game called Illusion of Gaia that I sometimes talk about. It was an Enix title back in the day, and I thought to myself, well, what would Will do in this? It's almost like the little bracelets, like WWD. Whatever. But he was the main character, and I was like, he would be brave here. He would use, like, he would be able to knock this literally out of the park. So when you're thinking about a game in scenarios when it's not about the game, that's when you know that it has left an impact on you. And to that same point, that is what Nintendo has done time and time again. Like, one more story. I remember, oh my God, this is embarrassing, but I'll share it. I played soccer in middle school, okay? And like, I don't know why I did this, but like when we're in 7th grade, I guess things happen. I picked up a bad habit of running, okay? And like, I don't know why, but I began running with my arms out to my side, okay? And I don't know why I did this until one of my teammates said, "Why the heck are you running like Mario with your arms out to your side?" And I was like, oh my God, did I adopt Mario's stupid run for soccer? And if you go to Mario 64, he goes and he's got that little plop, 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 plop sort of thing. And I don't know.
Oh, that is adorable.
Well, it was bully worthy back then.
I was thinking of Phoebe running in Friends, if anybody's watched the show Friends.
Fortunately, I was fast. I was just clotheslining everybody I ran by.
I run with my shoulders hunched all the time in soccer. Everybody made fun of me. So, I think that's part of it. Well, and with club sports these days, kids can't just have fun and run
kids
like Mario.
Can't have fun.
Everything.
They're all competing for that scholarship.
Everybody's going to be a scholarship athlete. My 5-year-old has an NIL deal.
Just give it time. They're ruining sports.
They are. Get Coach Saban on here to talk about it.
Saban, get on here.
So that's kind of what I was thinking as well, as this external play experience. And I realized this, and we'll talk more about this kind of in our closing thoughts segment here, where we talk about how to restore some of that sense of awe and wonder. But for me, a lot of the time, it's the stories and experiences in video games give me the reminders of things that I want to fight for and things to be alive for in life. And a lot of the times, I'm going to video games to recover from life these days at the end of the day. And so it's more escape than it is like inspiration and launch into the life that I want. And so when that balance doesn't happen, where the stories and characters that I experience don't inspire me to live a better life, they just kind of are something that help me endure the life that I already have, I can tell that I'm losing some of that sense of wonder and imagination, because the games aren't seeping into my real life. My real life is seeping into my gaming.
It's getting sucked into the game life.
Yeah. So we'll talk more about that in that closing segment. But that's what that made me think of.
Well, it's such a tension. I was on Threads, social media site, yesterday, and I saw a post where a girl, very clickbaity, rage baity, said men who video game are children and like basically shadows of themselves. And they said, it's not a hobby, it's an addiction. You're a grown man, you should get out and get a job. And so I have a problem where I can't keep my mouth shut. So I hopped in the comments and I was like, I teach, using video games, real life lessons, even the ideas of faith and deeper understanding, so that people can feel equipped to live a deeper, more meaningful, and more holistic life outside of their game life. And so I think that it all depends on the way that you're treating this medium. And then I said, because I can't help myself, I said, it sounds though like you've had some different kinds of experience. And I really hope that you're able to see past that perspective one day, because it is bigger than that. Now, again, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, none of it is great for discourse. But I, again, am a teacher. So it's like,
every time we interact with it, we have the opportunity to make it a little better of a space.
But you got to try to change the narrative. You got to change the narrative just a little bit, because I mean, I challenge anybody to tell me that my hobby is an addiction and to discount all of the other things that I have going in my life. I've got a job. I have strong relationships. I am at the gym regularly. Like, I have a very full and whole life. And I credit that to these formative experiences provided by Nintendo, Square Enix, a lot of these developers, publishers, and console makers who have given me a framework and a new lens to live my everyday life.
We always argued that video games are art, and art exists for art's sake.
Yep.
And it exists to help us express and experience life more richly than we would without it. That is in part what it does. And so video games meet that proof test for me in my life. They meet that proof test for you in your life and a lot of the people that we know. So that's all that it takes to validate that, let alone the heaps of research and history and information that we have now about the power of interactive play experiences and storytelling. Now, that was a little more critical of an opinion that you mentioned on Threads. Let's talk a little bit about...
I try to be very open, embracing everything, but sometimes you just got to call it out.
Well, I think the topic
insufficient.
was criticism in general. And you didn't open the door to criticism. You just responded to the invitation that was had. But the opinion was critical. Yeah. So the opinion being critical on Threads, we've heard this one before, so I don't have anybody specific to quote, but let's talk about how Nintendo gets a bit of a pass on some of their practices. And the way that we'll phrase this is, why does Nintendo get away with doing some of the things that they do in decision-making and business practices that other properties and companies maybe don't get the same kind of shielding to the criticism? We're going to talk about some specifics here, but just in general, will you introduce the concept that oftentimes people think Nintendo is immune to criticism and that their practices, whatever they do, they have brought them down from the stone tablets, and these are the new laws of video gaming because this is the decision that Nintendo has made? And you would argue that maybe that isn't the case.
Part of it is they can back it up, usually. Like, they are going to put out things that are very, good, very quality. And when they don't, boy, it's just piling on things. I mean, we all remember the Wii U era and stuff. It's like, Microsoft's going to buy Nintendo. And, they were laughed out of the office, right? Because Nintendo just Scrooge McDuck sitting on their money bin, I guess.
I think the balance sheet is okay.
Yeah, I think they're going to be fine. But, number one, they continually deliver on the things they do. So this is not a small publisher that's saying, I'm going to raise the price of games. This is like one of the standard bearers, if not the standard bearer that everybody is trying. I mean, if you look around, I'm not just floating Nintendo, like building them up. Look at the number of handhelds that are moving into the market now. They're chasing the trend of the Switch. And so the question is, why does Nintendo really get a pass on a lot of these things? Number one, they deliver. Number two, and this is actually interesting, I only discovered this a couple weeks ago, or thought about this a couple weeks ago. They do not engage in the conversations about them. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to a podcast from Kit and Krista. Kit and Krista used to work for Nintendo, and they've got a really great channel, really interesting stuff with Nintendo. But they were talking about the criticism. And they said one of the most infuriating things working with Nintendo, and I'm misquoting them a little bit, but the heart of it is that we were specifically told, do not respond to criticism. You just let it go, and it will be a flash in the pan, and we'll let people speak, and then we'll prove them wrong. We'll make them happy with the next decision. Mm-hmm. And it's because that's kind of our attention span, and Nintendo does this really, really well. We do not engage with just the Twitter sphere, for example. We're going to keep doing what we're doing, and it tends to be okay for them in that respect. You don't see Nintendo go back on a lot of decisions. Sometimes, but you really, really don't. I think about the 3DS, mm-hmm. and I think that there was giving a gift card something or other, eShop points or something, because of a faulty 3DS launch or something. I can't remember all the details of that, but that was the one time in my mind that I'm like, okay, they realized that they could have done that better and shifted. But the rest of the time, it's like, no, we're raising the price. We're not going to discuss. No, we're pushing the system out. This is the vision that we have. Nothing more to discuss.
Yeah, I think they do have a more curated vision mm-hmm. that results in some confusion for customers when they move the line. Things get more expensive as time goes on. Things have a greater scope, and the cost to develop them can increase. And they also have to adjust for inflation that's just present in the marketplace. They have been a company for a long time. So the inflation between the 1980s compared to now is a pretty radical thing. And so there's a few kind of main points where prices have really gone up. And I think we forget what that looked like back in the day. So Nintendo 64 was a big deal because when the Nintendo 64 came out, it was very expensive for a console. And the video games cost $60 when it came out. So you have talked in the past about how many games a year you would expect to buy compared to now. Let's talk about that a little bit. So back in the day when the Nintendo 64 came out, and you got a game for maybe your birthday or Christmas, how many games a year are you buying here? How much life do you have to get out of your games? And what did that cycle look like compared to now, where it seems like there's so many more games and so many more opportunities to purchase them?
Gosh, I remember birthday and Christmas were like the big ones for me. I might get 1 or 2 games for birthday, 1 or 2 games for Christmas or something like that. And like any more than that, like if my grandma pitched in or something like that and didn't give me clothes or ornaments. My grandmother loved to give me Hallmark ornaments.
Ornaments?
Yeah.
As a gift so that you can appreciate them when you're older?
Yeah, that was exactly it. She always said, "You'll always remember me when you're decorating the tree." And to her credit, I do. But back then, it's like, couldn't I have just gotten a video game? Today, I do appreciate it.
Yeah, maybe.
It's like one of those things of like, she taught me patience. Anyway,
she taught me patience. Good lesson.
Thanks, Grandma.
Would have loved to learn it any other way.
Other way.
Maybe you could have gotten me, Metroid, and I could have learned to be patient rolling around as a little ball trying to figure out how to get through the puzzles. That also would teach me patience.
I've learned patience through day-night cycles in video games, okay? Like Brave Fencer Musashi, one of the first day-night cycles I ever played. I had to wait until the freaking villager NPC would go to bed at night so that I could sneak into this one place. Like that taught me patience too, but also a Hallmark ornament.
It also taught you planning, scheduling, calendaring.
Yes, you're absolutely right. What's his name? Stephen Covey would be very happy with my time management.
Mario Party taught us conflict management and first aid, as we're going to discuss soon.
If we play Mario Party, there would be first aid. Absolutely.
Okay,
I
so
don't remember what I was saying. What was I saying?
So Nintendo bears the burden for rising prices, and they also tend to bear the burden for some confusing business practices. So, for example, when Nintendo 64 came out, it was already an expensive console, like we've established. Then they released a new game that was coming out called Donkey Kong 64.
This was a practice. It was.
Now, when Donkey Kong 64 came out, there was something called the expansion cartridge, I think is what it was called, right?
Expansion pack.
Expansion pack. It was this little red thing that, like, no one ever looked at this little hatch on the top of your Nintendo 64 ever until they announced that they were going to do this, which means that they planned for it to be expandable in the future. And it expanded the memory or something from like 4 megs to 8 megs or something like that, and allowed you to play the new Donkey Kong game. I have our personal experience with our friend group about this expansion pack. How was that received in your world?
I mean, nobody wanted Donkey Kong 64 outside of me. So it was just me going to.
That's great.
So I went to my parents. I was like, hey, this is it. So I know it's going to be the cost of 2 games, but let's try to do that. And then they gave it to me, and I was like, man, I liked Donkey Kong 64. That's about all I can say about Donkey Kong 64.
I loved Donkey Kong 64.
Did you? Okay, you were more of a DK 64.
Here was the real challenge, is that we've already talked that this console was expensive. We've already talked about how the console was expensive and the games were expensive. So we didn't get games as often as maybe you would nowadays. But they created an environment where we had to also, a bunch of like 9-year-olds had to explain to some parents why they needed an expansion thing for the thing that was already expensive to play the games.
Yeah.
If you can imagine the pleading, the slideshows, the poster boards that were created and the presentations for us to get, all we had to do was convince one of our parents, to let them get it. And we would take that expansion pack and bring it over to other people's houses because we only really had one. So if we wanted to play certain games, you had to have the expansion pack in there. Otherwise, when you stuck the game in, it was like, this game requires the expansion pack. Can you imagine being a child and your parents gets you a game or rents you a game, and then you get home and you're just like, hey, I can't play this.
Right.
Like, that is confusing.
No, it is confusing. It is incredibly confusing. And like so many companies tried to figure out how do we expand the capacity of our games without having to do a whole new console. For some, I'm thinking of, what was it, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and then they bring in Sonic and Knuckles, which is like a DLC cart that you put Sonic 3 into the Sonic and Knuckles bridge, then put it into your Sega, and you have like the expansion of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. It's just like they were so creative with very limited hardware, but this one was brutal because it was like you have to buy the expansion pack to put into your system. Then you also have to buy the DK64 game and put that into your system.
Because it came with DK64.
It did come with it.
When DK64 launched, it launched with the expansion
but
pack.
it was a bigger
It was
price,
like a big box.
right?
Yeah. And
a big box.
A little more
I remember
expensive.
that now. It had like a little red top. Yeah.
But they also did some things really well, too. So, for example, they were the first console... Well, Dreamcast maybe was the first console to do this. Or who put 4 controller ports actually on the console?
64 first.
So that was huge.
Did the Dreamcast come out after?
Yeah, I think it did. Yeah.
Let's Google. Hang on.
Let's get this right. Who put
let's see.
4 controller ports?
I think it was the Nintendo 64 because it came out
Nintendo
a year
64
before.
Was the first one to put 4. So before that, you had to use what was called like a multi-tap.
A multi-tap.
So
I played it for Secret of Mana.
Thank you. You had to have a multi-tap. So you had to have an adapter to turn one controller port into multiple controller ports. So this was good, right? That's a major hardware advancement that was very appreciated. So they did that, but then they weren't able to include the expansion pack, and it created a lot of agony for us as children there with everything that they did. Now, there's some other things that I think Nintendo tends to not get criticism or a pass for. A lot of people talk about the online platform.
Yeah.
In this day and age, 2025, it's insane that they would not have good online play. Now, at first you said, oh, well, you don't have to pay for online, so it makes sense that maybe it's not quite as good. So that was kind of the lane. You're like, you know what? Online on Nintendo is free. You don't have to pay anything for it. It's fine. Well, then you started having to pay for it.
Yeah.
So then you're paying for it, and it's still bad.
Yeah, that was their reticence to get into the online gaming space was really frustrating because other consoles were doing it and PC had done it for a long time. And so it's like, I just want to play Mario Kart with my friends. I want to do it online with my friends, and they would not. Now, I understand some of their concerns. If this gaming system is accessible to everybody and our chief mode is fun and we really want to push couch co-op, we also are wanting to mitigate potential harm and damage because online space, as we know, it can be really toxic. Gaming lobbies
and dangerous.
And dangerous. And so Nintendo was rightfully so hesitant to jump into that. That said, gosh, I just wish they'd hurried it up.
They're late to the game.
They were late to the game,
It's like, totally fair to say that they're late to the game.
It's fair to say. Even regardless of all of their good intentions for it, it's like, come on, figure out this thing quicker.
But I think it also does illustrate.
But now, I will say, for the Switch 2, the game chat feature is actually pretty darn good. Really, really cool. So I feel like they're nailing it in a lot of ways with this.
Well, that is where we're headed next, is to talk about some of the gap that's created as their age demographics has expanded, and as those of us who grew up playing it as children still look for meaningful play experiences from Nintendo as we get older. Now, before we get into that, we need to talk about one more thing, and that is their history with control interfaces and the challenges that have existed that they get a pass for from some people.
Okay, say more. What do you mean?
Joy-Con drift. and And allegedly, they have not fixed the core issue with what that was.
Yeah.
It is a problem if you
It is.
release a control interface that is not accurate and that breaks over time and
Yeah.
do not have a good plan in place to fix it. That is a challenge. The
It
Joy-Cons are a great device. Love how modular they are. Love that you can turn it sideways. Love that you can turn one controller into two controllers. It's awesome. But you know what it makes me think of? Do you remember playing Mario Party on the Nintendo 64?
Yeah, I do.
Do you remember the games where you had to like spin the rope?
Yes.
And so,
yes, I do.
so most people used their thumbs, but
Yeah.
you know that you can spin
Everybody
a
used their
lot
palms,
faster
yeah.
if you use the palm.
Yeah, I still do that. I did that last night in Final Fantasy X.
Well, the Nintendo 64 joystick had these ridges on top of it.
They
and
did,
when you
yeah.
spin your palm really, really quickly trying to beat a mini game, you actually burn a blister into
Yeah,
the
you
center
do.
of your palm. Did
Yeah,
you ever
you
get
do.
a blister from playing
I
Mario
never
Party?
did, but
I got
you know.
a bad one. I mean, in the middle of my hand at a sleepover, and it stung. Oh, it
Oh,
stung.
no.
It ruined my whole sleepover. I was like,
Oh,
oh, my
no.
hand. I won.
Well, and that's all that matters.
I won.
If you
I won.
So
But do you remember what they had to do to combat people using their palms?
what did they do?
They released a glove that you could order and you could send off,
Did they?
and they would, yes, look it up, Nintendo 64 controller glove, and tell me what you find. I'll keep talking while you do it.
Yeah, please.
So they released a glove. I think it was a fingerless glove with padding on the palm that you could order if you experienced like unnecessary abrasion or had sensitive skin, to be able to play and engage with games on the Nintendo 64, because there were enough people like me who burned a hole all the way through their hand.
Oh my gosh! So I've looked up Mario Party N64 controller glove, and in addition to the fingerless gloves that I'm seeing here, I'm seeing wounds. I'm seeing hand wounds.
Yes.
This is nuts.
It was literally a scarring experience. So when we talk about Joy-Con drift and the controller interfaces having some native flaws, this is not something new
Yeah.
to them.
Well, the thing about the Joy-Con drift with the Switch 2, I have not had that problem personally, but the fact that they launched the system with the caveat, if you get Joy-Con drift, we'll replace it like we did with the Switch 1, that feels weird to say. It's like, all I can figure is either the tech is so good that they had to keep it, or the tech is so cheap that they had to keep
It's well established.
It's well established.
Typically, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't give someone a car and say, if the wheels fall off while you're on the interstate,
Sure.
don't worry. Once the car comes to a stop, we'll put the wheels back on if you get back to us. Like it's if it's got a flaw, like let's address the flaw. But a lot of the time that's not the case, and this is obviously not a safety issue unless you're playing some very high stakes gaming. But I think when we look at the intentional, thoughtful design that goes into the rest of their products and play experiences, it feels disconnected and like a bit of a gap in what we've come to expect. So kudos to them for making our expectations high and consistently delivering. However, it does make the areas in which there are some challenges and those expectations aren't met a little bit
dicey.
sharper when we start to focus.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of saying it. The only other thing that I would say that Nintendo, and they don't really get a pass for this, but they do get a lot of criticism, and then there's just nothing with it. They are legal sharks, especially in the emulation space. And while I am not an emulator, there's a big controversy about, should we be allowed to emulate games, game conservation, preservation, that sort of thing. I totally get that sort of thing. Most of the people that I'm usually hearing from, I'm kind of like, are you just wanting free games? Like, why are you wanting to emulate? But I understand the need for preservation, conservation, especially when games are not on their eShop and stuff. So that I know gives people a lot of trauma, triggering.
I'll say this, and then I'll move us on to our next topic, where we want to talk about how seriously we should approach some of these historical play experiences and what our adult expectations should be of maybe some of our favorite franchises here. The emulation space is, one, there's some rights and ownership. Do I own this product, or do I own your permission to use this product as I want? That has been unclear historically and is even murkier now. But as we get into terms of service and things like that, what is ownership versus am I really just kind of leasing access to this property? So what do I own? What do I not own? Which is we won't get into that. Then the other thing is, if Nintendo had all of these properties fully available and they kept supporting them and they were doing the preservation work or were forthright about the preservation work that they were doing, then there wouldn't be as many concerns about the access to it. But because there's lack of access, unclear communication, therefore no expectations are set as for what they view their role is as their policy of preserving the IPs that they have. Understand from a business perspective their responsibility to their properties and what they want to do. But at the same time, once you make something like that and you create art and you give it away, there is an element of public ownership of the ideas and their participation in that ecosystem that I think needs to be managed. So if they were perfectly preserving and we could go down to the library in Nintendo land and figure it all out, that would be one thing, but they're not. So in the murkiness and in the uncertainty, these concerns, I think, have a lot of validity.
But this is probably why they've moved to the game key card thing, where, we're really moving to an era of digital games where it is more of like a leasing sort of thing, kind of like iTunes, like the music that I have access to on iTunes and stuff. Yikes. Is it mine? Will it go away if iTunes goes away? And this is the era that we're in. Now, I will say, full disclosure, the game keycard thing does not bother me. I had a scare at the end of the Switch 1 cycle where I thought that I had lost my Breath of the Wild.
Oh.
Okay, and I was scouring the house looking for it. I eventually found it. It was in some other case. But I was like, okay, I think I'm going to move digital because I just am tired of keeping up with game cards and all this stuff. So here's the thing. I've lived a month entirely digital with my Switch 2. And Evan, the ability to pop in and play any game at any time, no matter where I am, without the concern of do I have a card with me? Oh my gosh. I'm a convert to it now, and I never thought I would be a non-physical person, but here we are.
The trade-offs are clear. The benefits are clearly that for these digital things. But then there's also the trade-offs of ownership, sharing, families, having something physical. And so I think the real challenge is removal of consumer choice.
Oh, yeah.
So if a consumer is able to look at a product and choose which trade-off works for them, I'm not going to have a physical copy because I want a digital, I want all the benefits of that, then that is the consumer choosing which lane they want. Yeah. And they have the option to do that. When we move in a different direction and the consumer loses that choice, and that choice is then made for them, I think that is where a lot of the challenges lie, because if consumers want physical products and there's enough physical product to justify the medium, then the market is going to respond to that. Yeah. But when consumer choice is taken away and consumer agency is taken away, I think that is bad and does not allow the market to really truly reflect what everyone wants. So that's where I think I'll cap that. Any other thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think that there are so many different business practices, especially with sell and resell of games, that a lot of these console makers and developers, for that matter, are concerned, publishers, I should say, are leaving money on the table. And so it's like, we want people to buy for our games. I think specifically of GameStop and how they are going to have to change their business moving forward. Now, don't get me wrong. I love physical games that I can just haul up in a bag and take over to GameStop and get, $60, $70 for them and then get a new game. I like that cycle. That's what I did throughout college and early career stuff. But I think that I think that it's just unfortunately inevitable. And so I was thinking, what are the physical games that I will get? Probably the Final Fantasy series collector's editions. I will do that because that means something to me.
Sure.
And even if I won't be able to play them anymore, the box is something that holds some kind of value to me. But it's going to be an interesting transition. I thought we were going to get it more during the PS5 era, but it seems like the next slew of consoles is going to be it. And that seems to be the case with the Switch too. They're really pushing digital and a higher price point. So they're really pioneering that.
Well, everybody has their different preferences as far as the play experiences that you want. I have blended. There's some things that I buy digital, and there's some things that I always make sure that I get a physical copy. And I will say, I really like being able to choose which one works for me in which scenario. And I would love for the market to continue to exist and for publishers to respect the wishes of folks who want to own it physically compared to those who might want to own it digitally. And I'm hopeful that we'll find a way forward that is consumer friendly at the same time. So let's talk about how seriously, as we get older, we should approach some of these properties that we maybe fell in love with when we were younger. I think there was some specific controversy around the canon story timeline for the new Donkey Kong game that came to mind for you that had some impact on this being a particular topic that we wanted to cover in this.
Yeah.
What is going on in Donkey Kong, in New Donk City, if you will?
Well, not even New Donk City, because that hasn't been built yet. Now, because in Donkey Kong Bonanza, apparently,
do we need do we need to do like an investigative timeline for this?
Honestly,
part of the episode where it's
Final
like
Fantasy
serial?
Remake had it has nothing on the timeline of the Nintendo universe. Donkey Kong Bonanza has Donkey Kong as we know him, and Cranky Kong, who allegedly was the villain in the original Mario Brothers Donkey Kong, where he would jump over barrels and climb up to save Pauline.
Yeah.
Okay, so Cranky Kong was that Donkey Kong. In this game, Cranky Kong exists. Donkey Kong also meets a very young Pauline. So you can see where the timeline begins to get confusing, because Cranky Kong was... Anyway, a whole deal.
Are we sure this isn't a multiverse situation?
I heard whispers came in and changed the past.
Would the whispers in Donkey Kong be like the crocodile, ghost crocodiles? The
Kremling whispers. That's it. The Kremling whispers. That's it.
Great.
I love it. Anyway, the game looks fun as heck, but the Donkey Kong lore fans, which I didn't know existed until a couple weeks ago, they have come out and said, what happened to the lore? How is this possible? And stuff. And some people are saying, just play the game. It will make sense once you play the game. None of Nintendo's people have said that. Just content creators. They'll play the game once it'll make sense. Others are just like, welcome to the Zelda fandom, because we've been dealing with timeline nonsense for 20 years. Have you ever seen the Hyrule Historia of the branching timelines of Zelda and where the game you're playing currently fits in?
You purchased a copy of it for my wife for a gift over a decade ago because she had questions about the Zelda timeline,
and I bought her.
We were talking about it, and you said, "Listen, I've got a text that will fix this."
I have a text that'll fix this.
We should have known that we would have arrived at this moment based on that.
Honest to God, we did. Wow, that's funny. Well, yeah, I mean, it's robust to think about the Zelda continuity.
Oh, you can't see the bookcase in the camera. I think it's over there.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna have to dive into that at the next Zelda release to figure things out.
So what we're looking at here, though, is to what extent is there a responsibility to address the challenge of making a Donkey Kong game? Let's just talk about Donkey Kong, for example, that is fun for people who both played it when they were 8 years old back in the day and are now 48 years old and want to relive their Donkey Kong play experience. And when a game for children is not any longer crafted for adults and they feel some gaps in that experience or whatever it is, whether it's just the nature of the property, there's a million different arguments that you could have. What should our expectation be as adult gamers with these childhood franchises and what those play experiences should be. Are these games for us, or are they in a more tertiary way? They're for us, where they're kind of us adjacent.
Kind of alongside everything that we've talked about with Nintendo in this particular show, it goes back to maybe needing to re-understand or reinterpret and renegotiate our relationship with what Nintendo is trying to do as a company. In an interview, Miyamoto, creator of Mario, Donkey Kong, and all these, he once said that when it comes to the characters and the worlds that they're talking about and creating, he wants it to be more akin to Mickey Mouse. Okay? And so when we think about that, think about the way that Disney handles Mickey Mouse lore.
Incredible wealth generation with a problematic past.
But think about it. What happened first in Mickey Mouse's continuity? Right? Like, where does it fall? Where does it fall in...
Are we going back to Steamboat Willie days, or what are we doing
Steamboat Willie versus when you had, like, I don't know, Mickey Mouse Club. When did he become the heir apparent in the Magic Kingdom, or whatever it is, like...
Upon whence did he usurp the throne?
Disney's not interested in answering those questions. They are interested in giving you episodes of his life and experience that are fun and memorable in that moment. And Nintendo is determined that Mario, Donkey Kong, and Zelda, are all going to do that. There's not really...
Mario movie was good.
Love the Mario movie.
We're getting the Zelda movie.
If I were to say there is a canonicity to the Zelda or the Mario timeline, I would probably point to the movies. Existing or upcoming, not the 1995 one. I 1994 one.
I reject this. I reject this wholeheartedly.
About it.
I watched. I didn't have a Nintendo, so renting the Mario movie was like, I was like, this doesn't seem like what my friends are.
What is this? This is like edgelord undercity boss. Like,
cannot. I loved, because I love science fiction. I loved every minute of that stupid movie. So the question
is, oh my god, okay.
I loved it. I loved the grittiness. It was like Cyberpunk 2020.
I tried to love it.
Kingdom.
Real story. I was at camp when that movie had just released, and I wanted the action figures, and they were coming out at Walmart while I was at camp. And I was so homesick, and I would write letters to my mom from camp. It was only a week. I don't know how the mail moved so fast, but I sent letters back. I was like, did you get the action figures? And so she brought the action figure with her to pick me up from camp. Okay?
Mama Noctis!
So I also bought the soundtrack to the Mario Brothers movie. And I don't know if you've ever listened to this hilarious soundtrack.
I have.
It is terrible, okay? I remember vividly driving around one afternoon. We're listening to the cassette tape, the Mario Brothers movie. And there is a song called, I don't remember the title. I think it's called Tie Your Mother Down. Okay. And my father, after an awkward silence, turned it off and said, I think we're done listening to that. Because my mom was in the car and we were all just like bopping along, and I wanted to listen to Mario Brothers. But what a misstep for the Mario franchise to... But now the new Mario movie is great. Now the old one's fine, but the soundtrack probably isn't great.
The times they have changed a little bit, and companies are a little more hands-on with how their IPs are used for good reason.
For good reason, right?
And video game movies have really come a long way, but
they have.
I will say, it makes me wonder, much like movies, as we get new technology and ability to tell stories and have characters live in more vibrant worlds. Movies sometimes get remade because it's a great story that has the ability to be told in a different way. Yeah. I would argue that even more so than movies, video games have the ability to tell similar stories or give new experiences to players as technology changes. So as technology creates new opportunities to tell new stories, what do we do with the old versions of the stories? We've prepared a list of games to get to talk about that were like big jumps in technology. So buckle up, everybody here. But what do you think?
Well, I think that these newer iterations, especially in Nintendo franchises, they're telling the same story with modern graphics, modern gameplay, all that kind of stuff. And so, like, it's always Mario saving the princess for the most part. I mean, you riff on it a little bit with Sunshine and some other
there's
things,
rabbits, but they're
sometimes
not called
there's rabbits.
rabbits.
But they're telling essentially the same story. And I think Zelda also kind of falls into this as well. Now, they've retconned it with some timeline stuff as well. But when you think about that sort of thing, I think it frees you up to enjoy what is versus how does this fit with my prior knowledge. And it makes Nintendo franchises easily accessible to newcomers because you don't feel like you've missed out on anything. That's one of the issues of the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy right now, because it's how much do I need to know versus how much of this is a retelling, and it's murky. It's
well, yeah, it does. It frees you up for what is. I mean, I think that the games are designed for a majority to maximize their audience in a lot of ways. Now, what I mean by maximize their audience isn't that every game is for every person.
No.
But there are certain lanes in genres and game types that there's an audience for.
Yeah.
We've seen it with Expedition 33 and the resurgence in discussion around what life left turn-based games and turn-based combat has. We have seen it with thinking specifically about like Dark Souls. So difficult games that are really challenging and mechanically intensive to beat and are intentionally kind of frustrating have a strong audience. It is not a majority audience. You have to be the type of player that enjoys that kind of experience, but they are made to maximize their reach to their audience.
Yeah.
The games have to sell in order for them to make more games. So they have kind of some economic responsibility in their process here. When we talk about games, though, that have had remarkably different play experiences that change the game with technology, we're talking about games like Ocarina of Time. We went from 2D to 3D with Zelda here. And that was, you know what? Let's just talk about like our first impressions of some of these games really quick. Ocarina of Time, first time you got to run around as Zelda, or as Link. How did that feel?
It was incredible. Did you know I got to play that at E3?
Stop it.
For the first time?
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. It was incredible. And I was just like blown away because I love Link to the Past. And like all the Zeldas before that. And I was just like, it's a whole new world.
And sometimes you need to revisit the ability. You got to let some other stuff go in order to be able to tell the stories that you want. And especially with video game play experiences being as long as they are, 30, 40, 60 hours, there's so much content that's put to tell the story of one game that it would be almost impossible to have it fully contained and fully realistic throughout every part of the other story. Now, I would not want to sacrifice a future play experience due to new technology just because some random NPC in some side quest said one thing that means they can't take the story in that direction.
Right.
I think it's totally fine. Now, I think most of the discussion happens around what point is that too much taking a chainsaw to the past versus a scalpel to find things that are tactful. Sure, that's where most of it rests. But you don't get games like Final Fantasy VII if you're not willing to take new risks and things. You remember what it was like. You don't get games like Halo 2. But talk about the difference in playing Halo 2 versus Halo 1. What was it like for you and your friends?
Well, I didn't have an Xbox. So I played Xbox or Halo 1 with a friend. I was like, well, this is pretty cool. But then Halo 2 is what hooked me. And it was because everything was just a little bit more polished. The world felt a little bit more robust. The lore felt a little bit more compelling, I guess, with the Arbiter and the enemies and things like
Amazing
that.
story.
So that when Halo 3 came around, that is when I was like, okay, I'm all in. To the point that I went and got the Xbox 360 collector's Halo 3 edition or something.
And it's the progress that made
and it was the progress that made me
more.
Exactly. And then I went back and played the remake or remaster or whatever of the Halo 1 thing.
And the technology gives us the ability to have new play experiences. Being able to dual wield in the way that you are. Being able to play split screen as seamlessly as you could. Being able to do the co-op with all the different vehicles and the skulls that you could do to change the modifiers for the way that you played the campaign made it infinitely replayable. But just because you can do a run where the grunts explode and make party hat noises instead of exploding doesn't demean or really take away too much from that kind of core play experience. GTA 3 was a huge one, a fully open, big story where you could break a lot of laws, and none of us should have ever played it as kids.
Probably
one
true.
that was big and impactful to you, Metal Gear Solid. Talk about the difference between...
Oh, man. Metal Gear Solid was such a banger game for me. I played Metal Gear on the regular Nintendo. Did not get past the first truck because I was a child and did not understand what I was doing or playing. But then Metal Gear Solid comes out, and just the cinematic nature, the music, the stealth that felt like it was actual stealth, like there was a cone of awareness of all the NPCs,
brilliant.
and like I was hooked. It sold me on an entire genre.
Well, there's a number of other games, so we'd be curious in the comments too, and in the Discord, what are some games that the sequel was better than the original? It was a great next step, a great evolution. It doesn't take anything away from the first game, but what kind of play experiences have you had in different games that would have been held back if they tried to focus too much on the original compared to something else? We'd love to know what it is. Well, as we kind of wrap up, let's talk about this. How do we capture that sense of wonder, that sense of imagination that we talked about at the beginning as we've had our first Nintendo experiences? And how do we have that as adults when we feel like, as we've gotten older, that we've maybe lost a little bit of that imagination and that fun? We still love the hobby, but in seasons of our life, if we're honest, gaming feels like just another thing on the to-do list compared to something that we get to really use to make our lives richer and something that we look forward to. What do we do when we start navigating that tension, and what options do we have for those play experiences?
I'll tell a quick story. The other night, I'm sitting on my couch and I'm playing Mario Kart World. Okay, I'm playing it on the screen, and some friends are over, and one's playing on his phone, the other is reading a book. It's a lively party. It's just like we're just hanging out. Okay,
that sounds like a very nice slice of life, though.
It is just slice of life. You don't always have to be doing something, like we're all just kind of doing our own thing or whatever. And so I'm playing, and I'm not racing. I'm in the open world free roam. Okay, and I am having the time of my life. I found like a shy guy on a flying carpet. I found like dolphins in an ocean that were just jumping, and I tried to land on top of them from like a ramp in a flying airplane mode. I found camels. I found a triceratops that I tried to ride on top of. And the entire time I'm like giggling to myself and putting myself in photo mode so I can get some like amazing photos. Me in photo mode. And like one of my friends looked up and he was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like,
"Fun."
I was like, "I'm having a blast." And he was like, "You're not even racing." And I was like, "Yeah, but have you discovered these things?" I was like, "I just found this flying carpet." And then like literally a UFO showed up and I was like, "Look at that UFO over there." And I went over to it, and wouldn't you know it, like I was able to pilot the UFO.
No.
Afterwards. Like it was just like, every second of this was not about chasing that gold cup. It was not about beating 150cc. It was just about like exploring the world and having fun. And it reminded me of when I was a kid, and my brother and I would play Mario Kart 64. And we wouldn't race, but we would go around the tracks. And first we'd try to mess up all the other racers. Okay? Shoot the shells the wrong way. But then we would find other shortcuts. And we would find, oh, like, look at this little thing. You can knock over these tires over here. And it was that idea of discovering the game rather than delivering the objectives of the game. And so that's what I really think makes the difference for me. And a lot of the games that I play, I really want to try to discover the world, not deliver the deliverables. Side questing in video games, any sort of thing that is like get from point A to point B, well, that feels like work to me. How do you make it play? How do you turn it into, I just am going to turn off for a little bit and enjoy this experience, and then I'm going to go back to my real life. That is what the luxury of boredom afforded us as kids. And that's what we lost as adults, I think. If we can get back to that, we're going to enjoy games a lot more.
Well, the enjoyment of it all, just that I'm just having a blast, really stands out to me. Because for me, in this season of life, tend to have a backlog of games and it's really hard to keep up with all the stories. And so I think about my play experiences a lot of time about what I should do versus what I could do.
Ooh, yeah.
And so I say, oh, I'm this far in this game, so I really should. With this playtime, go and finish this game because then it'll be done. But then my gaming has the same pressure that my to-do list around the house has and that my work to-do list has. And then I'm gaming not on a schedule, which I think is fine to schedule play, but I'm gaming on an agenda.
Ugh. And that's the worst feeling. That's the worst feeling.
Rather than my games being the thing that give life and excitement to my chores, to my work, the things that I talk about with my coworkers, that work and productivity creep is pulling into my games. It's going the wrong way.
Dude, can I say to our whole discussion today, this I think is why Nintendo will never implement trophies and achievements. Because it feels too much like a checklist and work, and they want you to experience the world.
I had never thought about that. I didn't even really think about how there weren't trophies. And I'm not a trophy and achievement person. If you know me at all, you know that. But that is crazy. I've never noticed that there aren't any in Nintendo games.
That's it. And in their games, they don't even really have checklists. You have to go to a separate screen in Breath of the Wild to even see the quest that you've picked up.
What about stickers and things like that? Do you
count
those
stickers and
as
things
like a more approachable way to do some kind of collecting?
Yeah, I think that they're okay with collectibles like Koroks. You got 999 Koroks or whatever it is, 900 Koroks, and stuff. I think they're okay with that, but it is that little hit of you're 72% done with the game. No, I think Nintendo has this mindset of you're done with the game when you're done with the game. Like, that's it. There is no finish line.
Yeah,
you can go back to Breath of the Wild as much as you want.
Yeah.
You can go back to these worlds however long. And so because there is the idea of once I platinum a game, I'm not coming back to it. And until I platinum a game, there's still tasks to be done. I think also to our regular fan base and viewership, that's the biggest complaint that people had with Rebirth and the side quests and stuff. And it's like, it felt like a checklist toward the end, Chadley's checklist. By the end, Nintendo sidesteps that misstep in a lot of ways.
That's a good point. Well, I think that I don't have any definitive answer for me, too, how I take things from what I should do to could do. But I think I am also allowing myself the space to just not play games if I don't want to. Like, if I'm going to be thinking about the game that I should be playing when I'm playing something else, that's the wrong direction with that kind of structure. That's too much pressure to put on this time in my day that I have blocked off that I need to recharge, be inspired, and relax. Instead, I'm just trying to get things done. And I think that goes to the point that I think a lot of those boundaries and lines in our lives these days and in the society that we find ourselves in 2025 are very, very blurred. There's a lot of pressure to commoditize all your hobbies. I recognize that we're talking about this on a show that we release on YouTube on a regular schedule. But that's kind of the point of us doing this show, is that we said discussions need to be had about how to have more fun and how to think thoughtfully about our play experiences, which is why we're here. And we want to create discussion and have fun with everybody else while we do it.
That's such a great point, because I was just thinking about, like, sometimes it is hard to balance that. Sometimes we do need to cover games that may or may not be where my mood really is striking me. You know, there's been times when it's like, I've got to play through this game. It is the worst season of my year grading wise, but I've got to play through this 40, 50 hour game in order to make some good content and meet some deadlines and stuff. But part of my tension and what I've discovered is, when I'm playing games for content, it fundamentally changes the way that I'm experiencing that game. Whereas I'm not doing Mario Kart World for content. I'm playing it for genuine fun, and there is no time limit, no deadline. And because of that, I'm discovering dolphins, UFOs, and all kinds of cool things. That's how I play most of the games that I most enjoy. In addition to all of the games that we're trying to cover on the channel right now, I picked up Death Stranding 1, okay? I am not going to cover any content about that game. But I'm just having a good time in this walking delivery FedEx simulator with a baby. And I'm passing the controller to some friends. We're watching the game together. And it's just a fun vibe, you know?
I lose time in that game. That game goes like full time dilation. I have no idea how long I've been trying to do something because I'm just approaching the task. And there's games that do a better job putting you in that environment.
Sure. But for me, it was. I know that Death Stranding 2 just came out, and I may be interested in playing that. But like,
is it out already?
It came out like 2 days ago or something.
I am a bad. See, I.
Yeah, I don't want to give you something on your checklist.
Well, no. So here's what's challenging for me about modern gaming is that I can't keep up with all the games, especially the long story games, and the modern video game media and really YouTube algorithms makes you feel like everybody is playing every game and fully experiencing it because there's someone who is specialized in it, who it's their favorite game, and you need to be able to talk about it or know about it. And it all happens at too quick of a pace. And if you have kids or not, or whatever your other responsibilities are, it's really hard to keep up with it. And so this is easier said than done, and I have not been able to fully do this, but disabusing myself of the feeling that I need to play every game just because it's good.
You do
is so challenging.
It is so hard, especially in the space that we live in, you know? But there's not enough time, and you've got to begin to prioritize things. The other things that I've had to learn, especially as I've met content creators and reviewers and stuff, is they are not playing these games to the fullest extent. That's just not a thing. Now, sometimes you'll be covering a game and it surprises you and strikes you. And it's like, oh man, this one really sunk its teeth into me. But for a lot of these huge 100-hour games, reviewers are putting in 30, 40 hours on it. And then having to move on to the next thing simply because time is a very limited resource and they have to keep going, you know? So that to me freed me up from that temptation and to say, what are the games that I genuinely want to play? And as a content creator, what are the games that I genuinely want to cover? I'm not going to cover everything. I'm going to say no to some things, to some opportunities, and I have. Simply because I'm like, I'm not sure that's something that really captivates our interests.
Yeah. There's
hard
two
thing
things.
to say.
Yeah, there's two things that I have found helpful, and we would love to know what you have found helpful and discuss this some in the comments and in the Discord, because this is it. We give ourselves and each other, especially even in our conversations, permission to just have fun.
Have fun.
I have more fun playing games because of the time that we spend talking about it and doing the show and facilitating conversations with all the RAs and everybody who contributes to trying to help people have fun, whether it's Magic the Gathering, board games, card games, video games, movies and shows. Talking about it and enjoying it with other people makes it more fun for me and enriches my play experience, but I'm not much of a solitary player. I'm more of like a social player.
Somebody asked me, how do you decide what games you're going to really lean into, do a lecture series, and cover on? And the answer is really simple. I want to. I do what I want to. Like, I'm playing Final Fantasy X this summer because I thought it would be a fun vibe, and I wanted to. Okay? I'm playing Magic the Gathering not because I have a sponsorship deal with Magic. You can ask anybody. We don't do that. I've paid for almost all of my Magic.
I would say we're
things,
open to it, though.
We are very open to it. I need that gold chocobo and like wow.
I don't think I don't think anybody can afford that.
Oh man, if you got the gold chocobo, would you keep it? Just quick question.
The first one sold for $40,000.
50,
right?
$40,000, yeah.
The first one sold for $40,000.
It did.
There aren't too many collector's items that I would own. So $40,000 is in the like.
$40,000's in
my life is a little less stressful with a $40,000 cushion somewhere.
I think so.
I can do some good with that money and also be a little less stressed. So $40,000 for a piece of cardboard is probably a sell.
Probably up there.
Probably a sell for me if I'm honest. But if I felt like it was going to appreciate and that I could make more,
you'd hold on to it a
later, then that's an asset.
But you're
I would have to
definitely selling it at some point.
Probably.
Definitely. It's not framed and put
Yeah.
on a wall. Got it.
No, I don't. I just don't. I don't think. I think at that point the cold hard cash is a greater
I
appreciation.
think it's
than the
I would
item.
appreciate the cold hard cash more than the framed on the wall. So
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyways, so the two things that I have experienced.
I play what I want. That's what I'm saying.
There you go. One is the 50% rule, where when you're learning how to do something new, especially art or any kind of new skill that is also a hobby, they say do the 50% rule, which is try to improve 50% of your time, but make sure you're just enjoying creativity and fun 50% of the time as well. So if you're going to learn how to draw, then just doodle and sketch for half your time. And I think with gaming, that can be a good thing for me. I'll say 50% of the time, I'm going to try and work through whatever story game I'm trying to work through.
Yeah.
And then 50% of the time, and when I find I'm just going to play whatever I feel like playing.
Yeah.
And when that balance gets out of whack one way or the other, then I feel like I have some good things to stand on there. And then oh my gosh, I completely forgot what the other thing was going to be. Like we started talking about Magic the Gathering.
You know, that's what Magic does to us.
I remembered now. Perfect. Yeah, Magic the Gathering. Oh man, I was cracking up at you and Nick's video. I mean, I was howling, laughing at all the different things that you guys were saying.
He's so good at explaining, and people in the comments have loved him.
Best turns of phrase, like the best turns of phrase. Old Southern boy, like he's so good. Oh, it's so good. The other thing that I have done is that I will, especially with long single player games, I will play as long and as much as I want, and then when I feel myself stall out, I'll just go watch somebody else finish the story. And that's totally fine.
Okay.
If I have 60 plus hours in a game and the fun of those mechanics has worn off, and I really just kind of want to know what's going to happen in the story,
I get it.
I'll just put it down, and I will, while I'm working on something else, I will just watch a Let's Play and let somebody finish it. I've purchased the game. I've experienced the game as much as I can experience it.
Yep.
And now it's time to just know what happens and be able to move on to the next one.
So good.
And
that's so good.
Not feeling like that is cheating or that I'm a failure as a gamer.
I would love to bring
tough.
on. We really need to bring on someday, like a medical expert to talk about compulsory behavior and what it is in us.
Is this an intervention?
Demands. No, you're able to stop yourself, right?
Yeah.
But so many of us are not able to. Like we're halfway to platinum, and we got to get that platinum.
Yeah.
Or, we got to get that completion mark. What is it about that, and like what is good about it, and what could be harmful about it? I think that would be a really great conversation.
I would love to talk about that, because for me, it's am I able to stop, or am I unable to finish the game?
Ooh, man.
What is that? Because there's some things that I'm like, I really need to put this down. And there's some ways where I'm like, I just can't get this across the line.
And honestly, if you have that kind of like completionist mindset, and I know so many of our viewers have struggled with this, they've said this in the comments, it is almost daunting to start a new game and to say, I'm picking this up, but because it's a contract saying I'm going to spend 50 to 80 hours with this world. So it's not a failure to complete, but it's a failure to start.
Well, I think the biggest thing that I have taken from this discussion is that Nintendo reminds us to have fun. And they do it in their marketing, they do it in their gameplay structure, and they do it in the way that they encourage us to engage with play. And that when I think about Nintendo and I think about the next evolution with the Switch 2, it is a reminder that I am supposed to be having fun, first of all, in my play experiences. And I think that is well illustrated by their history, by their current choices, and by the fact that this has just inspired me to just have some more fun playing games and to figure out how to put myself in the position to do that. So thank you.
Nintendo's really good at creating catalytic conversations like this. And sometimes they're heated and sometimes they're wistful and nostalgic, but because they've been around for so long and they're such a standard bearer, like I was saying, there's a lot to pick apart there. And it leads into, even conversations about Halo and all the things that we talked about today. So I think that I always love the conversations that happen when Nintendo is Nintendoing, right? And they don't do that better than at a console launch. And I think that we're seeing that reflected in all the gaming spaces stuff. So anyway, that has been our conversation about the Nintendo Switch 2 and about 100 other things too today.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Evan, for being with us. Also, we just need to say this. This, I think, is like our 53rd episode. We made it just over a year of this show.
Yeah.
Isn't that nuts?
We don't ever, I don't really love the thing where it's like the state of the this, or,
We don't,
you know,
but-
like, wow, it's been all this, you know, so maybe we'll talk, I'm sure we'll talk more about
We
this
will,
as time has
but
gone
it's
on.
just important to note, if you've been with us since episode 1, thank you so much.
Yes.
That means you've been with us for a year, which is
This program is brought to
bonkers.
you by viewers like you.
Viewers like you. And to everybody else, I'm glad that you've hopped in at some point over the last year, and we look forward to making more content for you in the future, having more conversations and deep dives, maybe with a medical expert.
This
So-
conversation is a product of us saying, what would it look like for us to do 52 weeks
true.
of things in a row? What could be accomplished? What would we learn? How would we grow? And I'll be honest, we did it. Like,
We
it was
did it.
not guaranteed
It was
that we
not.
would be able to do 1 year of content,
true.
one piece a week for an entire year. And I'm very proud of myself. I'm
Yeah.
very proud of you. And I'm very proud of us. Because
Yeah.
that's not easy to do. Like, consistency and output
No.
is challenging. It was
So, big pat on the back, everybody.
Everybody pat yourself.
Good job.
Thank you for being
It's
a part
good.
of this journey, and I'm so looking forward to everything that's next. It's been a really fun space to be able to discuss, and my life is more rich having gotten to meet everyone and being able to have these kinds of conversations, so I'm very grateful. So thank you for being a wonderful co-host and inviting me in, Wade, and thank you,
Thank you.
those who are listening and watching, because this program is brought to you by viewers
Just
like
like
you.
you. What can we say? You guys are the best, as Noctis would say. Remember to like and subscribe. Make sure that you are following us for all of our content. We're continuing our Final Fantasy X Summer Pilgrimage, Summer Lecture Series, live on Twitch and YouTube throughout the summer. You can check our website, profnoctis.com, for all of the latest updates regarding that. Also, stay tuned for more Magic the Gathering content. And if you are looking for all of the information on how to strategize and create your own decks and all that stuff, make sure that you're checking out our content. Like us on all the socials, all that kind of stuff, and we
Everywhere.
will see you soon in our next episode. Thanks for watching, and Walt Tall, my friends. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks to Husky by the Geek for our theme music. Thanks to Nick Smith for our graphics. And most of all, thanks to you. This program is brought to you by viewers like you, and we really appreciate you. We hope everything's going great in your world, that you're able to restore some fun and wonder and magic to your play experiences, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Bye-bye.